Sure. Here's a 500-word informative and story-driven article on the topic. What happens if you masturbate and don't orgasm? What happens if you masturbate and don't orgasm? Jason had always assumed there were only two ways a solo session could end, either with satisfaction or frustration. But one night, after a long and stressful day, he found himself in unfamiliar territory. He started masturbating, not for pleasure, but as a way to unwind. Halfway through, he stopped. Not because he was interrupted, but because the urge simply vanished. No climax, no closure, just a curious emptiness. It made him wonder, what actually happens when you masturbate and don't orgasm? The answer, it turns out, is more interesting than he expected, and not harmful at all. When someone masturbates, their body goes through a sequence of physical and mental arousal. Blood flows to the genitals, heart rate increases, and the brain starts producing feel-good chemicals like dopamine. Normally, this stimulation leads to orgasm, followed by a flood of oxytocin and a deep sense of relaxation. But if the climax doesn't happen, the body just gradually calms itself down. Physically, the blood flow recedes, and hormones like cortisol, the stress hormone, might stick around a little longer. You might feel a bit on edge or unfinished, especially if you were very close to orgasm. That feeling even has a name: edging. Deliberately bringing yourself near climax and then stopping. Some people do it on purpose to build up intensity. Others, like Jason, stop unintentionally or lose interest. Psychologically, not orgasming might cause mild frustration or mental restlessness, depending on your expectations. But there's no evidence that it's bad for your health. There's no risk of backed up semen or harm to reproductive organs. The body reabsorbs anything that isn't released. It's a self-regulating system. For some people, not orgasming can even be empowering. It shifts the focus from performance to exploration. Jason, curious about his own experience, did a little research and discovered that some mindfulness techniques actually encourage stopping before climax to cultivate better body awareness. That night, he realized he didn't need orgasm to feel in control of his body or to relax. Of course, if you regularly experience difficulty reaching orgasm when you want to, that could signal stress, fatigue, hormonal issues, or mental distractions. But a one-time thing? Totally normal. Jason's story ends with a small revelation. It's okay to leave the end of the story unwritten sometimes. Orgasm might be the punchline most people expect, but the rest of the experience can still be satisfying, or at least insightful. Let me know if you'd like this turned into a voiceover. It would need to be shortened to just 2 sentences, or if you want a different tone or angle on the topic. Absolutely. Here's an additional 500-word paragraph that continues Jason's story and further explores the topic. A few days later, Jason brought the experience up in a group chat with some close friends, a conversation that surprised him in its honesty. To his relief, several of them had experienced the same thing, but had never thought much of it. One of his friends, Mark, shared that during times of high stress or anxiety, he sometimes couldn't finish either. "It's like my body's there, but my brain's not on board," he said. That comment struck a chord. Jason realized how much mental state plays into arousal and climax. Unlike mechanical processes like digestion or breathing, sexual response is a complex mix of psychology and physiology. Mood, stress levels, distractions, medications, even hydration can all affect how things go or don't. As Jason dug deeper into research and forums, he discovered this situation was far more common than most people talked about. In fact, many sex therapists note that not climaxing during solo or partnered sex isn't just normal, it's sometimes therapeutic. It can help people reconnect with their bodies without pressure or expectations. For people recovering from performance anxiety or trying to heal from trauma, these incomplete sessions are part of the process. Jason also learned a bit about the idea of non-goal oriented pleasure. The idea is simple. Not every sexual or sensual experience needs to have a finish line. Some people enjoy touching, caressing, or exploring themselves simply for the experience of it. No climax required. This was radically different from how Jason had viewed masturbation all his life, as a way to release tension or fulfill a need. But maybe, he thought, it could be more than that. It could be a form of self-care, of checking in with himself, not just physically, but emotionally. He started noticing that the nights when he didn't orgasm weren't failures. They were just different. Sometimes he'd stop because he got sleepy, other times because the mood changed. And instead of feeling frustrated or annoyed, he felt curious. That shift in perspective helped his self-esteem too. Instead of judging himself for not finishing, he started appreciating that his body had its own rhythms and signals. It didn't always want or need release. Sometimes it just needed presence. That's not to say he didn't still enjoy orgasms. He did, and often. But now, when he didn't reach that point, he didn't feel shame or confusion. He just accepted it, like stopping a song halfway through because he'd already heard the part he liked. In fact, he found that the pressure to finish sometimes made it harder to relax. Letting go of that expectation made everything feel lighter, and that ultimately was the biggest takeaway for Jason. Sexual health isn't just about the climax. It's about the relationship you have with your body, your mind, and your expectations. Whether you finish or not, what matters most is that you're listening to yourself. Let me know if you'd like the story adapted into a shorter version for voiceover or want to explore another topic. Of course. Here's an additional 200-word paragraph to continue Jason's journey and deepen the theme. As time went on, Jason began to view his solo time as more than just a physical act. It became a kind of check-in ritual. He started noticing patterns. On days when he was mentally overwhelmed, he found it harder to stay aroused or focused. On calmer days, he could enjoy the sensations more deeply, even if they didn't lead to orgasm. It was a subtle, personal shift that changed how he treated himself in general. He stopped pressuring himself to perform or meet a certain outcome, and instead began valuing the quality of the experience. This mindset started bleeding into other parts of his life, too. Relationships, work, even how he handled stress. It wasn't about always chasing a peak, but about being present through the ups and downs. He shared this perspective with a few more friends, and to his surprise, many of them found it refreshing. In a culture that so often emphasizes results, Jason had stumbled upon the quiet power of just being in the moment. And it all started from a night he once thought of as unfinished. In truth, that night had offered him more than any climax could have. It had opened a door to understanding himself better. Want to wrap it up with a conclusion or turn part of this into a voiceover?